May 23, 1701, London, the infamous execution dock bordering the River Thames. Thousands hold their breath, crowding the pirate gallows, waiting to watch a man die. The executioner secures the noose, pushes him off the drop, and against all odds, the heavy rope snaps. The crowd gasps as he plunges into the freezing river mud, thrashing with the broken rope still tight around his neck. Choking for air and staring death in the face, the look in his eyes wasn't terror, it was pure devastation. The look of a man realizing he'd been ruthlessly betrayed. But the man choking in the mud wasn't some average criminal. He was a lethal privateer hand-picked by the King of England to hunt the world's worst pirates, essentially the British government's ultimate black ops agent. His name was Captain William Kidd. Backed with infinite funding, unchecked power, and a royal seal to wipe out piracy, how did this supposed hero become a ruthless killer on a British execution block? Was he actually the villain, or just the ultimate scapegoat for London's corrupt high society elites? History remembers him as a monster, but until his final breath, he swore he was totally innocent. To find the truth, you must look 4,500 miles away from London, straight to the coast of India, specifically an insane, calculated ambush off the western coast in the Malabar waters. The target was a massive, heavily armed ship called the Quedagh Merchant, owned by a mega-rich Surat merchant named Kurji. The sheer wealth on this ship was literally unimaginable for the time. We're talking about a floating palace stacked with gold, silver, rare silks, and spices. So how did hijacking one single ship completely terrify the entire British Empire? It sparked world history's greatest treasure hunt and kicked off a centuries-old pirate true crime thriller still unsolved today. One ship, one captain, and a missing treasure worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
The year is 1695. Captain William Kidd was living the ultimate dream in New York City, highly respected, insanely wealthy, and settling down into a quiet life with his wife and kids. That is, until Governor Richard Bellamont showed up at his door with a classified contract. The mission? Become a state-sanctioned privateer and hunt the deadliest pirates in the Indian Ocean. But this wasn't some noble crusade. The whole operation was bankrolled by four of Britain's most powerful elites, including Bellamont. Meaning, forget patriotism, this was a strictly off-the-books business deal. The catch? Kidd had to hijack the pirate loot, millions in stolen treasure, and funnel it straight back into the pockets of his elite sponsors. So, commanding a massive 34-cannon warship called the Adventure Galley, Kidd set sail as the British government's ultimate undercover agent, sparking a hunt that would change history. How does a state-sponsored hero, backed by the king himself to wipe out piracy, morph into the world's most notorious pirate and end up swinging from a British rope? That's the wild, true story we're diving into today. Welcome to Neutrix Vision. If you want more insane historical mysteries and true crime thrillers like this, hit that subscribe button now. Because despite the massive hype, infinite funding, and total power, this hunt was anything but easy. Out on the open ocean, things were about to go horribly. 18 months in, the mission was a complete disaster. They had scoured the African coast and swept through the infamous pirate haven of Madagascar, but Kidd hadn't captured a single ship. Meanwhile, the situation on board was becoming a literal nightmare. The ship was rotting and taking on heavy water, drinking supplies dried up, and his crew dropped dead from starvation and brutal cholera outbreaks. With zero treasure and their own survival on the line, the remaining crew grabbed their weapons and plotted full-blown mutiny. Kidd was cornered, either secure a massive payout now or get brutally murdered by his own men. Crushed by this insane life-or-death pressure, surrounded by the stench of rotting corpses and the suffocating isolation of the ocean, something inside him snapped. The undercover agent fighting for justice was gone. In his place, Captain Kidd was mutating into an apex predator, desperate to taste blood.
October 1697. Out in the endless dead emptiness of the Indian Ocean, Captain Kidd's ship drifted aimlessly. Between the brutal heat and suffocating silence, the tension on board hit boiling point. They were inches away from full-blown mutiny. After days of hunting targets, they kept coming up empty-handed. That's when the ship's gunner, William Moore, stepped up to publicly challenge Kidd. Moore stormed the deck, armed, screaming that Kidd was a coward, demanding they hijack every ship in sight, ignoring the law. By now, the rest of the crew backed Moore, grabbing weapons and closing in on Kidd. Every ounce of Kidd's authority was being brutally stripped away before his eyes. It was that split second before a massive riot exploded. Realizing his life was on the line, Kidd snapped. In a fit of pure rage, he grabbed the closest thing on deck, a heavy wooden bucket strapped with thick iron rings. He swung it with everything he had, smashing it straight into William Moore's head. That single brutal hit instantly crushed Moore's skull. Bleeding out, he collapsed onto the wooden planks. Before anyone could process what had happened, it was over. Moore was dead by the next day. The so-called righteous agent sent to hunt pirates had crossed the ultimate line. He had committed his first murder with the blood of his own crewmen on his hands. With that blood soaking into the wooden deck, there was no turning back. In the eyes of the law, Kidd wasn't an agent anymore. He was a stone-cold killer. He knew if he sailed back to London empty-handed now, the royal court would send him straight to the gallows. To keep his mutinous crew from tearing him apart and save his own skin, he needed a massive multi-million-dollar payout now. Burying whatever was left of his morals, Captain Kidd embraced the dark side, transforming into a ruthless pirate, a predator who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Hunting the biggest score of his life, he changed course and headed straight for the shores of India. The stage was set for one of the most insane hijackings in history.
January 1698. Fresh off the brutal murder of William Moore, Captain Kidd's ship lurked in the Indian Ocean, cruising off the Malabar coast. After days of dead-end waiting, he finally spotted it on the horizon, the biggest target of his life. It was the Kadog Merchant, a colossal vessel owned by an insanely wealthy merchant named Kurji. This thing was an absolute unit, a 400-ton beast heavily guarded by over 90 sailors. Shattering the ocean's dead silence, Kidd executed an unprovoked, calculated ambush, trapping the ship. Flexing his heavy artillery, he overpowered the giant vessel almost effortlessly. This wasn't just some random piracy gig. This was the kickoff to the greatest maritime heist in human history. Outgunned and cornered, the merchant crew had no choice but to surrender. After taking all 90 men hostage, Kidd rushed into the ship's lower cargo holds, and what he saw blew his mind. The deck was packed to the ceiling with priceless silks, mountains of gold, silver, and tons of saltpeter. He had just stumbled upon the personal treasury of a high-ranking minister from the unstoppable Mughal Empire. Instead of doing a quick grab and go, Kidd hijacked the entire 400-ton ship and every million-dollar asset on board. Knowing his crew was still on the edge of mutiny, he made a genius tactical play, secretly liquidating a chunk of the cargo off the coast of Cochin. He dumped a mountain of cold, hard cash and silver right in front of his starving, desperate crew. In 24 hours, the ruthless killer who was about to be murdered by his own men flipped the script and became their idol. But the wildest part? Even after pulling off this historic heist, Kidd wasn't sweating it at all. While searching the ship, he found paperwork, specifically French passes. Now, back then, Britain and France were locked in an all-out war. Because the ship was operating under French licenses, Kidd convinced himself the capture was 100% legal and that he was pulling off a heroic win for the King of England. He justified it in his head. He wasn't a criminal, he was a government agent executing a flawless operation. But while he was celebrating the biggest payday of his life, he was blind to one terrifying reality. He had just picked a fight with the Mughal Empire powerhouse. And this was just the spark igniting a catastrophic storm waiting for him back in London.
Kidd ditched his rotting old ship, the Adventure Galley, forever, and set sail for the Caribbean on the hijacked Queen Merchant, living in a fantasy. He was convinced that rolling up with a multi-million-dollar treasure would make the British Empire welcome him back as a conquering hero. Because he had those French passes in his pocket, he believed he hadn't done anything wrong, and that this insane payout was 100% legal. Captain Kidd breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he could waltz back into London with the biggest haul in world history. But that little victory lap was brutally short-lived, because the shockwave of his heist was triggering a geopolitical earthquake thousands of miles away in India. The news made its way straight to the court of the all-powerful Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. A British captain had just hijacked the multi-million-dollar fortune belonging to his most trusted minister on the open ocean. Back then, the Mughal Empire wasn't just wealthy, they were the planet's biggest economic superpower. When Aurangzeb heard the news, he exploded with rage. In ruthless retaliation, the emperor ordered an instant shutdown of all British East India Company operations in India and threw their top executives into prison. Heavily armed Mughal forces surrounded the British trade factories. Kidd's lone heist didn't just cause drama, it threatened to wipe out the British Empire's entire existence in India. Facing the permanent loss of billions in global trade, the East India Company went into full-blown panic mode. To save their own necks and protect the empire, they and the London government had just one play left: brutally throw Captain Kidd under the bus. The ultimate undercover agent, handpicked by the king to catch pirates, was branded the world's most wanted fugitive by Britain itself. To pacify the furious Mughal emperor, Britain slapped a huge bounty straight on Kidd's head. Just like that, an intense global manhunt launched to bring him in, dead or alive. The supposed hero who used the infinite power of a nation to hunt prey had instantly become that same nation's ultimate target. The hunter was now the hunted. It wasn't until he hit the Caribbean that the terrifying reality clicked for Captain Kidd. He wasn't the king's untouchable undercover agent anymore. He was now the most wanted fugitive on the planet. He realized that cruising in a stolen 400-ton beast like the Quedagh Merchant was a huge liability. If the British Navy caught a glimpse, it was a guaranteed death trap. Operating with the cold mindset of a killer wiping down a crime scene, Kidd made his move. He offloaded the highest value loot onto a smaller vessel and dumped the hijacked ship off the coast of Catalina Island near the Dominican Republic. Desperate to erase the biggest piece of evidence connecting him to the heist, he set the ship on fire and sank it to the bottom of the ocean. As he watched it burn, he was turning his past life to ashes. After securing a smaller ship called the San Antonio, he went off the grid and set sail for New York. But Kidd refused to just walk in and surrender. He knew how the game was played, and that stash of loot was the only bargaining chip he had to save his neck. So he steered his ship toward an isolated spot off the New York coast called Gardiner's Island. Under the cover of darkness, he went ashore and secretly buried a huge chunk of his treasure, hiding piles of gold dust, silver bars, and rubies and diamonds deep in the dirt. That moment birthed Captain Kidd's lost treasure, the centuries-old mystery that treasure hunters globally are still obsessed with finding today. With that buried treasure locked in as his life insurance policy, he reached out to Lord Bellamont, the elite sponsor who gave him the mission. He pitched a high-stakes deal. He would use the French passes to clear his name, and in return, hand over the coordinates to the buried multi-million-dollar stash. He was convinced he could play the legal loopholes and outsmart the system. He moved with the confidence of an apex predator that had just slipped out of a deadly trap. He believed that between the French passes and the buried treasure, he was untouchable and safe from the gallows. But what he didn't realize was that Bellamont, the guy he counted on to save his life, had set him up in a brutally calculated, inescapable trap. Every single one of Captain Kidd's calculations was about to fatally backfire.
July 1699. Trusting Lord Bellamont's fake promises, Captain Kidd rolled into Boston ready to cut a deal. But what awaited him was a perfectly orchestrated British Empire trap. Bellamont had zero interest in saving Kidd's neck if it meant becoming public enemy number one to the Mughal emperor in India. Instead, he had Kidd arrested and thrown into brutal solitary confinement. Using the coordinates he squeezed out of his former agent, Bellamont headed to Gardiner's Island and dug up the buried loot. But when they finally cracked those chests open, they were stunned. What they found was only a tiny fraction of the multi-million-dollar haul Kidd had hijacked from the merchant ship. The remaining 90% of the treasure was missing, and Captain Kidd was the only person alive who knew where it was hidden. Dragged back to London in heavy iron chains, Kidd was thrown into trial. What played out next was straight out of a true crime courtroom thriller. He fought for his life on the stand, arguing that he wasn't a pirate, and the captured French paperwork proved his innocence. He begged the court over and over to let him present the documents, but the elites who bankrolled his mission were terrified of being exposed, and they needed him silenced to cover their tracks. Conveniently, the one crucial piece of evidence that could have cleared his name mysteriously vanished from the courtroom records. Up against the unchecked power of the British Empire, he was isolated and doomed. With the missing paperwork sealing his fate, the court convicted Kidd of piracy. On top of that, they slapped him with a brutal murder charge for taking the life of his gunner, William Moore. The verdict? Captain Kidd was sentenced to hang. Staring death in the face, Kidd played his final, desperate card. He pitched one last deal to the crown: spare his life, and he would hand over the coordinates to the missing hundreds of millions of dollars. But the British government didn't care about the money anymore. To save their global empire and protect their trade monopolies in India, they needed blood. They needed him dead. So taking the location of the greatest lost treasure in human history to the grave, Captain Kidd took his final steps up to the gallows. As we saw at the start of this documentary, that snapped rope didn't save him. They dragged him back up and hung him from those same gallows. But the British Empire's thirst for revenge didn't stop at his death. To send a chilling warning to any pirate or merchant ship entering London, they coated his corpse in thick black tar so it wouldn't decompose too fast. Then they shoved his body into a heavy iron cage and suspended it over the River Thames. Every sailor passing through London was forced to stare at this nightmare fuel. Left to rot in the blazing sun and freezing rain, his corpse hung in that cage for 3 straight years. And that multi-million-dollar secret he tried to trade for his life, it died in that iron cage with him, lost to history.
Generations of treasure hunters have turned the world upside down trying to find it, but the trail went dead. Fast forward centuries, in 2007, a scuba diver exploring off the coast of Catalina Island in the Dominican Republic stumbled across rusted cannons on the ocean floor. A team of researchers from Indiana University launched a deep-water investigation and confirmed the impossible. It was the wreckage of the Quedagh Merchant, the hijacked megaship Captain Kidd burned to cover his tracks. The legendary ghost ship stolen off the coast of India had finally awoken from its 300-year slumber. But there was one crushing twist. The hundreds of millions in gold, silver, and diamonds, it was gone. The vault was empty. Where Captain Kidd buried the rest of that fortune remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries on the planet. That fortune, the stolen wealth of the Mughal Empire, is still out there today, buried untouched somewhere off the US East Coast or hidden on a Caribbean island. And honestly, someone could trip over it tomorrow. Every historical mystery leaves us with one more burning question. So let me know what you thought about this true crime story in the comments. Also, drop a line telling me what kind of history deep dives you want to see next. Your support keeps this channel running and pushes us to make better videos. If you don't have time to type a full comment, just drop a thumbs up emoji or a single dot below. It means the world to us. If you love high-quality historical documentaries like this every week, hit that subscribe button for Neutrix Vision now. We'll be back next week with another story. Until then, signing off.